It was a crisp evening in Edinburgh. August, the air fluttering with excitement, the street lights already casting long shadows even as the festival crowds chattered and drifted between venues. And there, at the very heart of it all, stood Paul Sinha, comedian, quiz wizard, beloved face of television, and up until this week, fearless. Monday, the opening act. He took to the stage in his stand-up slot at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival with his usual sharp wit. The audience greeted him warmly, he made them laugh, he made them think. But as the laughter died down and the lights dimmed, Paul felt a weight in his chest. At first he brushed it off, just indigestion perhaps, or a result of nerves and the late nights the festival demanded. After all, he'd done this many times before. Yet on the walk back to his accommodation, the pain persisted. He paused under a lamppost, took a deep breath, and felt the air tighten around him. Something was wrong. Tuesday, denial in motion. He showed up for his next show, he greeted fans, he answered questions, he joked and quipped, but behind the smile, his mind was swirling. It must be nothing, he told himself. He had been through harder gigs, tougher crowds, and his brain was still our known quantity, razor-sharp, always 2 steps ahead. Still, the chest pain came back, stronger this time, a heavy pressing force that wouldn't let him ignore it. At the venue backstage, he shared a knowing glance with his husband, Oliver, who had sensed something off. Paul said nothing. He didn't want to pause the show, didn't want to upset anyone, didn't want to be that person. Wednesday, the first attack. It arrived with no fanfare. A small heart attack. He recalls how it dawned on him, a tightness, then a wave of panic, then the realization that his body was betraying his mind. He managed to finish the show, step off stage, and then sit down in hospital. The doctors were calm, efficient. His mind spun with questions. Am I done? He wondered. But even as the monitors bleeped, even as the nurses asked questions, he tried to joke. You don't stop being Paul Sinha just because your heart decided to take a break. But once home, the exhaustion took hold. His body told him what his mind yet didn't accept. This was serious. Thursday, the third week's shadow. The festival crowd pressed on outside his hotel window. The laughter, the music, the stage doors opening and closing. Paul tried to rise for his show. He went on stage, but the performance felt different. The interchangeable blur of jokes and applause didn't mask the ache behind his ribs. That night, he had another attack. A whisper at first, then a shout, his chest constricted, his breath caught. In the kind of moment that rewrites your body's story, he realized he wasn't indestructible. He traded the microphone for an IV drip, the bright lights for a hospital bed. Friday and Saturday, the waiting game. Somewhere in those days, Paul surrendered to the fact that control was an illusion. He lay in the ward, listening to the steady hiss of oxygen, the quiet footsteps of night nurses. He told himself, wait, recover, then come back. He thought of his fans, his husband, his accessible humor. He thought of the brain full of questions he still wanted to ask and answer. And on the penultimate night, sleep fled him. He listened instead to the bed 2 wards down, a phone on speakerphone. A woman shouting across the ward, "The ironic thing is he's the chaser I've always hated." The absurdity of that moment made Paul laugh, despite everything. In one of the darkest halls of recovery, humor found a crack through the gloom. It reminded him, even in this, even when shaky, he was still him. Digital Spy. uk.movies.yahoo.com. Sunday. Surgery and awakening. The surgery was scheduled, a coronary artery bypass. That week and a half, he calls it the worst of his life. I had a coronary artery bypass operation, which I can honestly say was the worst week and a half of my life. HELLO. The memories blur. The mask, the beep of machines, the slow tug back to consciousness. The first walk down the ward corridor, each step a triumph in itself. The nausea, the pain, the isolation, but also the moment when the surgeon's voice cracked. You got through it. And the return. Now recovering. His rhythm unsettled, but his mind the same. He says, everything has been a sort of comeback since then. Steady, unspectacular, comeback. No great drama. The free library. And behind that line lies something deeper. Humility, gratitude, a newfound respect for the fragility of the human body. Even for someone who darted through questions on the chase with lightning speed, whose intellect was the weapon, now faces a different kind of challenge, one of patience, rest, healing, and redefine. The bigger picture. Paul's story intersects with his earlier diagnosis of Parkinson's disease in 2019. He'd already been balancing comedy, quizzing, and the shifting outlines of a life altered. But the heart attacks and subsequent surgery brought realization. You can have the mind of a master quizzer, the stage presence of a comedian, but your body, your human body, can still rebel. He now says that performers, and everyone in fact, must think about holistic self-care. Stop pretending that late nights, stress, skipping doctor visits are harmless. Paul used to be a GP. He knows the systems, he knows the risks, and he wants others, especially those in the spotlight, to heed the signs sooner rather than later. uk.movies.yahoo.com. Humor in the heartbeat. What stands out is his capacity for humor even in the bleakest of rooms. That moment in the ward with the speakerphone wife shouting across the ward was surreal. Paul laughed because it was ridiculous. It was also life. He realized the vulnerability, but also the absurdity of his situation. The chaser I've always hated line cracked through the seriousness and gave back a shred of normalcy. Paul said, "It was an extraordinarily traumatic week for me. You've got to keep fighting, keep battling on, not least because you don't have any other options, really." Digital Spy. What he wants us to know. Cherish life. He says plainly, the seats, the stage, the applause, all wonderful, but ephemeral. The body underpins everything. If that falters, none of the rest matter quite so much. Listen to your body. Even quiz wizards have internal alarms. He ignored his at first. He regrets that. Find joy where you can. After the darkest days, the humor in the ward reminded him you can laugh through pain because laughter is also medicine. Redefine what success means. He's still Paul Sinha, still on the chase, still doing stand-up, but doing less, balancing more, choosing wisely. A slower pace doesn't mean you've given up. Epilogue. In the bright lights of the quiz set, he will be back. The microphone will be warm in his hand, the buzz-in light will flash. But something will be different. Because now every joke, every answer, every laugh comes with an extra heartbeat of gratitude. The worst week of my life has become the wake-up call of his life. Paul Sinha's story is not just one of survival. It's one of re-emergence. It's about knowing the worst but still reaching for the best. It's about a wise mind paired with a wounded body, and the unshakable spirit that says, I'm still here, I'll still show up, I'll still fight, but I'll fight differently. And as he steps back into view, we'll watch not just the quizzer who knows the answers, but the human being who found a new question: how to live well when life says pause.